Hello everyone, and welcome to Radio Habibi. My name is Selima.
And this is Rima.
And today,
we're celebrating the fall of the Assad regime. Yay!
ألف مبروك يا ريما.
Allah يبارك فيكي. Wallahi, it's been a long 60 years.
Yeah, so for context, Rima is from Damascus. And this week, the ex-president and dictator Bashar al-Assad fled after the rebel forces took over. And that marks the end of half a decade of the Assad family rule, and especially a very gruesome and oppressive past decade.
After the Syrian revolution during the Arab Spring in 2011, there was insane amounts of repression. A lot of people went into exile. A lot of people were put in prisons, a lot of people. So I think just acknowledging that this came at a very huge cost as well is very important, and to really honor all of the people who have whose lives changed and got destroyed, some people lost their lives to this. So yeah, he's gone. It's over.
Damn. How do you feel?
I'm just I'm still in disbelief. I honestly still cannot believe that a dictator that I never thought I would be able to speak about right now, on a podcast, or I would see any I didn't think I would see him leave in my lifetime. Honestly, I thought it was sun is gonna come and it'll just be forever, because that's his slogans, Assad forever. So it's still I think it'll take me quite a while to let this fully sink in. And as things just people are celebrating right now, which as they should, but as things settle, maybe that would let it fully sink in.
Yeah, so you're talking about the celebration right now, and earlier you mentioned how there's this expanded political imagination for people in Syria right now, where something that felt so impossible has happened, and now it's just such a new avenue for imagining futures, which is not devoid of its threats, but it's a very exciting time.
I think so many people, everyone I've talked to is I can dream now. I think a lot of, including myself, I just felt I really could not dream of a future, because the future was just so bleak, and I felt I was just fooling myself dreaming of anything. And I think the fact that the impossible has happened really allows people to hope and to actually do something. So many people now are starting to think of different initiatives and NGOs and all of these things that would help these Syrians heal from this. Because it's a long road ahead.
It's such a dual work, because there's the healing from the intense and extreme trauma, while you also need to move forward. And this time has so much momentum.
Yeah.
So it's such an interesting dual timeline to navigate.
Totally, yeah.
And you need people focused on both and witnessing the present.
It's so much.
So much. على كل حال مبروك عليكم ريما.
شكرا سيدي.
Since Rima's life was changing last week, and some unforeseen events shook the world, I conducted the interview with our highly esteemed guest on my own, and I'm bringing it back to the podcast. And this week we're talking to Sahba Aminikia, who's an Iranian American composer and creative director and founder of the Flying Carpet Festival, which is described as the greatest show on earth for kids who need it most. It's the mobile festival of music, circus art, storytelling that's happening in the Syrian-Turkish border. And it brings artists from all around the world and leads workshops for the kids, and is just the most wonderful thing that your brain can imagine, I think. So I'm really excited for this interview, Rima, and I can't wait to discuss it with you in a second.
Okay, let's do it.
Hello, Sahba Aminikia, and welcome to Radio Habibi. We are so grateful that you responded to our invitation, and I'm so excited to be talking to you today. So where are you in the world right now, and how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm in Ankara, Turkey, and I am just working from here and also exploring the city. So it's very, very fine.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let us begin. Sahba, can you tell us just like a little bit about your story, an overview of your journey, and how you landed where you landed today?
Absolutely. How much time do you have? I'm pretty old. So how it started was that I was a teenager in Iran. I grew up and I was raised in Iran until I was 26. And I come from a small minority in Iran, and they're called Baha'is. And they are under heavy persecution for the last 200 years in Iran. And one of those issues that the Baha'i community faces in Iran is that all young people who identify as Baha'is, they are deprived of higher education in Iran, because Iran doesn't recognize Baha'is as a religion. They only recognize 4 religions as confirmed religions that they should exist. And most of them are Abrahamic religions: Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and Zoroastrians. But also other minorities are persecuted and they have other issues. But the Baha'is are the worst. They are the ones that are constantly being called spies and constantly being persecuted and being imprisoned. Many of my friends are in prison right now. So my main motivation for coming out of Iran was to study. Actually, I had to go to university. I studied also 2 years in St. Petersburg, Russia, at the State Conservatory, because I was such a fan of Dmitry Shostakovich and I wanted to study with one of his students there. And that's how it started. And then I came back to Iran after 2 years. I found out I have basically no future in Iran. And I started a refugee process. I came to Turkey and I became a refugee. And my main reason for obtaining this refugee status was the fact that I could not study in Iran and I wanted to pursue my higher education in Iran. I lived in San Francisco. I studied at the San Francisco Conservatory. I got my master's degree in composition there. And right when I was even in school, I was a junior actually in my bachelor's degree. I started receiving commissions, and I have been very fortunate, very lucky. I lived 18 years there and I've worked with many high profile musicians and ensembles all across the States. This is my composition life. And in 2011, I had a trip to Iran because I'm a social refugee, so I could go back to Iran still. And that was the last time that I was able to see my homeland. I was arrested there and they took me on a 5-6 hour journey of intimidation and torture. And after that, they told me also to get out of Iran and not ever come back in 48 hours. So that's how I saw Tehran, my homeland, my hometown, for the last time. And since then, I haven't been able to go back to Iran. But in 2018, in 2017 earlier, I was having a full-time job at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco, and I was receiving commissions, and it was a very, kind of an American dream that everyone is looking for as an immigrant, as a first-generation immigrant. And what happened was I was realizing when Trump was elected for the first time, a lot of the dreams and political illusions that was in my mind was kind of dissolved. I realized that politics is not the realm that I want to belong to and to any side of the spectrum. So I removed my name from the Democratic Party. I became an independent voter and I was looking for opportunities because that was the time that the refugee crisis was happening all over the world and a lot of Syrian refugees were suffering. And specifically, it's initiated with the death of Alan Kurdi on the shores of Izmir, the Syrian child that was found dead and was drowned in the Mediterranean and was washed away on the shores of Izmir. So I thought that this is going to be the moment that the world is going to respond to and everything is going to change from this moment. And in fact, little was changed, and we got used to these scenes of these gruesome scenes that are happening right now. For example, also in Palestine, I realized that for some reason, American society really is kind of desensitized towards these pictures, and it's happening. And even now I can see it. That's one of my reasons, actually, the main reasons that I have difficulty coming back, actually. The way I see that everything goes on as it was before and nothing has changed, and many people are deprived of opportunities for speaking out or for talking about this issue. And it sounds just ridiculous to me, because I have a strong love for all ethnicities and for all groups in this region. And I have friends on every side of the spectrum, and I respect and love them. And I cannot just accept that people will not respond to a humanitarian crisis. And that's aside from ethnicity, religion, politics. And I felt that when people see children being killed and in this gruesome manner, there would be a response to it. And when there is no response, in a way, I feel like I'm living in a Nazi Germany, actually, that we are kind of numb and desensitized towards the suffering of our brothers and sisters, no matter what religion or ethnicity they're coming from. I would have felt the same for anyone, that going through this process. Anyway, so this is the beginning of the story. In the 2018, I met someone in a bar that she told me that her sister, she was Italian, and she told me that her sister was working in an organization in Turkey. She was volunteering for an organization in Turkey that teaches circus arts to Syrian youth. So I was immediately drawn to this idea, and I wanted to see what's happening. I became very curious. I started following them. The organization name is Sirkhane, which means the House of Circus in Farsi, in Turkish, in Kurdish. And I started looking them up, and I followed them on Instagram, and I saw some sort of a notice that they were looking for a music instructor. And I just reached out to them to see if there are any of my, if there is anything that I can help with, because I have many friends in Iran and in Middle Eastern countries, and I thought I can hook them up with one of these people and they can help somehow. But the moment I started talking, I became even more and more curious, because the founders of the organization seemed like very, very smart people. And that was not the expectation I had from the humanitarian world, in fact. I will tell you later what it means, actually. So I was having a trip to Nowruz. For the Nowruz, I was in Izmir in the March of 2018, and I had a one-day trip to Mardin, where this school is located. And I got and I arrived there. It was still the Syrian war happening. And this is an area that it is a Kurdish region. There are a lot of conflicts between the Kurdish militant groups in north of Syria and Turkey. So it's already kind of a demolished place. And I was a bit afraid, honestly, to go there, because it was in the midst of a war. I traveled there for one day, and they showed me around, and they showed me 3 centers that they had. And the co-founders of the organizations, Pinar Demiral and Sardal Adam, they both of them Turkish, and one is Kurdish, actually. Sardal is Kurdish, but is a Turkish citizen. And I was immediately drawn. There was this moment that I realized that I definitely want to be part of this group. They are just so amazing, and they are doing very cool things, and they have a very strong and large vision about what's happening. And I wanted to be part of that, because I was reaching out to many humanitarian organizations for the last 2 years before that, and none of them was even responding, So I thought that I always was under this impression that artistic vision has no place in this type of organizations, because you have to realize also that a lot of humanitarian work is financed and created by the same people who impose wars, actually, on other countries. So it's the same force that is paying for the recovery, and it's the same force that is paying for the bombs and the weapons, basically. And it's kind of a desensitized word. People don't they don't have any emotional connection to the work they're doing. They're mostly after numbers and the projects that are mostly financed by the European and American countries to keep the refugees in Turkey. because whenever it gets to the point of negotiation and political discussions, we hear about a group of refugees being drowned in the Mediterranean. And this is not by accident. This is something that is being used as a tool of negotiation. This is the world we are living in. So I was immediately drawn to this organization and I wanted to do something. And on that night, we started to write a proposal about starting a festival called Flying Carpet Festival. And I came back to San Francisco. I started talking to all these professional friends that I had in San Francisco. And there are a lot of them in San Francisco. And they were all looking for something, a way to contribute and to help me and support the situation with the refugee crisis. So my friend Christine, for example, she designed all the branding identity and the website. And it was just a work of my friends in the beginning. And I talked to 30, 40 of my friends, musicians, artists, to come and help me and actually travel to this region and work with me on this festival. And that's how it started. And now we are fundraising for the 7th edition of Flying Carpet Festival for next year. And it's become more of a competitive festival. There are 500 people, 400 people applying every year. And we take only 20 to 30 artists. We have a team of dedicated production artists who come from different countries, and they come every year and they help with the technical stuff and for creating costumes, for developing the stage and the story and the visual background visuals and the music. So it's a work of a lot of people. I just happen to be that person who connected them all. In fact, I could not do anything by myself. In fact, it's a group of people that are behind this, and selflessly, without name, they're working to make this happen every year. This year, we hosted around 80 people, and that includes 40 artists from 14 countries. And we had a full documentary team that they are making a documentary about Flying Carpet Festival, and a group from the European Festival Academy who were case studying the festival as an example of decolonization of arts and democratization of art. And this is how it's happening. It's a child that is growing very fast, and I'm very proud of it, and I love it. And I compose. My composition career is still ongoing. So doing both at the same time, it's been a challenge, but I love challenges, and I live for it. Yes.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for your generosity and for sharing your story so fully. And congratulations for this amazing work that you're doing. I want to get back to the Flying Carpet Festival and ask you a million questions about it. But before that, I wanted to say that I'm really sorry for the persecution that the Baha'i people go through in Iran, and what you have been through. That sounds really hard and painful and unjust.
Thank you. But at the same time, there is a Sufi belief that the world is already in a balance. And what we call justice is our own perception of justice. And it has nothing to do with the balance that the greater world is experiencing. We are just a small part of a larger reality. And we really don't understand what's going on. So we see, I sometimes myself doubt what's happening, that when you see 20,000 children being massacred, for example, but even that, there is a reason behind it, and there is a justification. There is a larger wisdom behind everything, and maybe death is not what we imagine. That might be the reason, but there are many reasons behind everything that is happening, and I believe in that we live in a world of stories, and we have a reason to live as long as we have we are following what world expects of us, not what we expect of the world.
Thank you so much for sharing that wisdom. And again, thank you so much for sharing your journey. It really sounds like you're, as a composer, paying a lot of attention to the needs of your time and actively seeking to build on other people's works while adding your own visions. So can you tell us more about your partnership with Serkan and what was their mission to begin with?
The mission is actually to prolong the childhood of children who have experienced something horrendous in their life through circus arts, music, and other forms of arts. But what is very significant about them is that they provide a platform for artists like me to create their own things. The fact is, someone like me, I am as foreigner in Turkey as you are, or as anyone else, or as someone who's just from the US. So I don't speak the language. I didn't at all actually speak the language. And I have no idea about the geopolitical status in Turkey and what's happening. But what was very beautiful and generous of these two co-founders is that they provided the space for me to create what I wanted to create. Even though in the beginning maybe it was not fully understandable that what I'm trying to create, actually. Just a simple example, they had a dormitory, for example, that the artists who were volunteering for Sekhane, they were staying in, and there were 6 people in the same room. And I just said that we cannot continue with this. If we want to work with the artists that are coming, they're coming from higher skills, we have to provide some sort of comfort for them, especially the people who are used to the comfort in Europe and in the US. And it has to be a middle ground that we can establish this. And it goes with in an area that there is no infrastructure. Sometimes you don't have even electricity in certain villages. I'm obsessing over small details like how the stage is designed or how the screen is installed, and everything has to be in perfect shape. That's if we follow the common culture in these regions. I grew up in this region. I grew up in Iran. We are not going to end up with different results. So I truly believe that part of the reason that this region is so chaotic and there is so much conflict happening is because people are barely exposed to true beauty and true symmetry and true care by the cultural makers. You can be easily part of the society, but also, and that is I think that's a good thing, in fact, but at the same time, you can also impose certain aesthetics in your work that is not common. But when people see the results, when they see a beautiful stage, when they see all the costumes designed in the most unified way, and for example, the first 2 years I worked with a children choir, and they would just show up in their own clothes, in their own attire, and that was fine. But when children are exposed and they are featured in a way, I think they should be featured, and that's what I learned from Sekhane. They should be featured as heroes, as people who are empowered, rather than an image of children who are coming from underprivileged background, and we are doing them a favor. So the fact is that we are there to serve, and serving has a specific meaning in the culture that I come from. Serving means something that I am there to wash their feet. So it means that I have to create the best thing I can out of that situation. Of course, observing the limitations and everything. So this year, for example, I took my entire choir and we bought beautiful unified clothes for all of them, so they would appear on stage in the most beautiful way, not as children who are coming from an underprivileged neighborhood. And this type of preparations in cultural work is all that matters. Actually, what differentiates between high arts and low arts is the fact that is in the presentation of the work, actually. So when you care about the stage, when you care about how people are presented and featured on your stage, in fact, you are giving your audience an extreme amount of love. You're telling them that we care about you. And that is something that in my own line of work, I see it's lost in the European-oriented arts. We expect people to come and sit in a dark hall and experience something that they don't understand and still be thankful to us that we created this for them, And that's why I personally think in the United States, for example, arts and culture have no effect and impact on social and political progress, because the fact that they are just an outcome and a product created for privileged people in the society. That's what I'm trying to achieve here. I'm working in a part of the world that is very conservative. I cannot talk about certain progressive ideas that exist in the urban areas in the US. So I worked on spiritual concepts. We worked on the Mantiq al-Tayr, or The Language of the Bird by Fariduddin Attar, which is a 12th century poetry, which has religious background. It comes from religious and spiritual background. And this is something that I did the same project in San Francisco, and under completely different composition. I wrote 15 minutes of music for my friends in San Francisco, and it was more challenging in the US to work on a spiritual concept than in Turkey, in fact, because the secular forces in the US are completely ignoring that majority of the people in the world, they believe in spirituality and faith, and just this simple concept, and it tells you how detached our cultural community is in the US. And that's why I think it has no effect on anything. In fact, it just exists as a form of luxury for rich people to pay visit to after their dinner.
And so you were talking about how the festival is composed of artists who are coming from all around the world. What is the culture you build between the artists? And I'm curious about how the festival affects them and what feedback you get.
It's really difficult to describe, and you should ask them how it changes their life. But I can tell you, we have hosted about 200 artists in the Flying Carpet Festival, and every single one of them wants to come back. And we have a problem with that, actually, how to accommodate new artists, actually. And the fact is, they come to a region that is very underprivileged, but they experience being together, and under hardship, majority of them, they get sick during this period. And they have to live under conditions, and sometimes electricity is an issue, water is an issue, and they create something together. And they are also prohibited from talking about politics, about racial politics, about religious politics, everything during their stay. So they have to work with each other, and they have to see each other as humans. So this is true about someone who's coming from a minority background, or it's true also for someone who's coming from European background, for example. They have to be seen as humans. They cannot be dehumanized because of who they are and their gender, their anything that is personal about them and is specific and is unique about them. So first of all, our artists are not necessarily all of them left-leaning kind of people. They come from every walk of life. We have people who are religious, conservative, even they have right tendencies, and they still gather under one roof. And that is the pride of my life, in fact, actually, that you can bring people of very different political backgrounds together. And the reason we do that is that we choose artists solely on merit. And that sounds like a very backward idea in the US, but in fact, actually, the fact that it sounds backwards, it means that people of culture, they don't believe that talented and skilled people exist in every ethnicity and every walk of life. I strongly believe they do. So I strongly believe that there are incredible people coming from the continent of Asia. They're coming from the Australia. They're coming from US. They're coming from Africa, from Middle East. And I think talented people exist everywhere. So I simply go after people based on their skills and what they can contribute. And we always effortlessly end up in the most diverse, group of artists, in fact, actually, without quotas, without any sort of artificial implementation of diversity. I come from a background, and as a minority myself growing up in Iran, I strongly believe people of every color, they carry talent and beauty inside of themselves. And we are part of a larger soul, and every one of us is a different flower in the garden of humanity, in fact, actually. We just have to have the eyes and the openness to see that. For example, working with an artist coming from United Kingdom, of course, and all communications are in English. Of course, when they send their application, the application looks perfect and everything is so, well documented, all the experiences. And of course, working with someone coming from Uganda, they might have not the skills to create the same biography or same resume. It's my responsibility as the director of this festival festival to look deeply into every person and see what their potentials really is. Sometimes they are not well documented in their resume, in their application form, but you can, if you just dig more and be open to to creating art in a real diverse way, meaning there would be no genre, no prejudice towards a certain group. You end up with a very colorful, interesting group of people coming from every walk of life, in fact, actually. And this has been the case for the last 6 years I've been running the festival. I respect European arts as much as I respect African arts, as much as I respect Middle Eastern arts. So they are all coming. We play the type of music that includes Terry Riley, includes Chopin and Debussy and Bach this year. We did an incredible section from St. Matthew by Bach. And also we play Turkish music, Kurdish music. We had a singer from Greece. We had a hip hop singer and a rapper from New York. We had 3 different choreographers, one of them hip hop, one of them more like oriental dancing, and coming from the US actually. And we have a movement designer coming from India every year. So the beauty that these people, they stay together, they eat together, they hang out together, and they create something. And we work on a 2-hour storytelling experience from scratch. We find a story, we translate it to Turkish, we vernacularize it, and we also work on design, costume design, light design, visual background from months before. When the artists arrive in Mardin, they have 2 days to put this entire experience together, morning to night. And this hardship and suffering and going through very difficult times and in a very intense way, it creates a sense of kinship and I don't know what I call it, like this friendship, this love, in fact, between them. That is, they all have issues coming back home actually after the festival. That is the main issue. That is the most common issue. Everyone who departs from Flying Carpet, it takes a month or so for them to get back to their regular life actually. And this is kind of catastrophic. It shows how our regular lives and how our normal lives are so detached from one another. And it takes as if they are part of the family and they lose their family when they leave, you know. They still keep up with each other and they come back, some of them, and some of them they hang out with each other. But that moment that they gather together for a common purpose on their suffering and on their hardship is something that I think every human being on earth should experience. And this stops us from fighting with each other.
First, this sounds like a really powerful experience. I can only imagine the kinds of bonds that artists develop during their work for the Flying Carpet Festival. And you emphasize the importance of hardship for people to come together and create something meaningful. So I'm curious, what do you think is the role of suffering in achieving like these kinds of higher purposes?
There is a larger philosophy that I believe in, and it's against what, at least in the Western culture, and nowadays in Eastern culture also, because Eastern culture is nowadays as capitalist as the Western culture, you know. If you doubt that, come to Turkey, come to Iran, come to, you know, and you will see these gigantic malls and how people are trying to find happiness in this consumerism that has come from another society. But the fact is that I think at least in the Western culture, in the original Western culture, enduring pain and suffering is something that we avoid. And everything that exists in our culture is about avoiding that suffering. It's about easing the pain. Societies that have a higher consciousness, they have a higher also usage of drugs, for example, in the US, you know, because the more conscious you are, you have to ease down and numb down those feelings in order, because you don't see it around yourself, honestly. So this easing down the pain and the suffering is the issue, in fact. I think, in any human society. We have to accept our fate and accept what the world expects of us. And that comes with suffering. This story is eternal. It comes from Moses, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, every prophet that you have seen in the world. They have endured extreme pain. None of them was seeking comfort and a regular bourgeois life. That's the reality of it. None of these materialistic tools are going to give us satisfaction and ease the pain of living. So we should act in a way, as Tolstoy says, to deserve our suffering, and to accept that the suffering is part of the beauty of life and is a huge part of it. I don't think that there is any spiritual awakening without suffering. And some people ask whether joy can be the source of spiritual awakening. I don't think so. And I'm open to be proved wrong. But in my opinion, suffering, as any prophet in the world, as any thinker, as any poet, as any artist of importance can describe to you, is the main source and the main force behind spiritual advancement and spiritual development. And so not avoiding pain, and that creates new thoughts in you, because everything we do is towards more comfort, having a more comfortable job, having a more stable life, having a family. That is not about truly about attaining love. It's more about actually some sort of capitalism around what you have and owning people and owning something that belongs to you. And even if you want to dedicate yourself to something other than yourself, it has to be something that is from your own genes, not from someone else's genes, and all these are in fact the uglier side of capitalism. And there is a more beautiful side of capitalism. I know people who spend all their life attaining materialistic tools and then put it all into something useful and into something that is extremely useful for the humanity, and they end up living like very average people. I know this type of people also. So everyone's story is different. It's very difficult to tell people what to do. But everyone have to find meaning in their own way of life, in fact. And that's what makes life less meaningless. Otherwise, if we don't have a higher purpose in our life, life is in fact meaningless. It's boring, meaningless. Any spiritual, any materialistic way of living can become boring. And, after a while, we don't enjoy that anymore. There is some sort of temporariness behind it. So I think when you put all these elements together in everyone's life, there a clue would come up, would appear to you, and listening to yourself, to your heart, it will eventually lead you towards a different way of living. And that different way of living, in fact, is the antidote to every problem that you see around yourself. So when you see, for example, this massacre of children in Palestine, this has direct connection with the consumerism in the US, whether we accept it or not. We are literally, as American citizens, we are literally paying for it, like directly paying for it. And pretending to be joyful and happy while we are doing that, that is the issue, in fact, actually. This desensitization, this fact that we are not part of that is something separate from us, but I'm still going to pay taxes. And I know that 70% of this tax is going towards destruction and genocides and massacring people on the other side of the world. So this detachment, this lack of connection between the two is what creates ugliness, in my opinion, all around the world. We have to feel more connected to what we are doing, being more conscious of what we are paying for, what we are funding, and whether our moral grounds would allow that, basically. And I think all these elements, when you put them together, then you might come up with some new story in your life, which is going to be very different from what most of the people are living.
So you're talking about the importance of reckoning with the suffering around us and sinking into it and accepting it and experiencing it. So I'm wondering here, what is the role of music in the spiritual quest? And in your life, per se, what has music represented?
Interesting. So I think in my own case, music was actually the only method that I was able to see the world. I don't think music is a career. I don't think it's a job. Music, I think it's a way of spirituality, and you have to pursue it that way. You have to imagine when any person who achieves any truth or arrives at any truth in their life, they are very, how should I put it? Restless about the truth. You know, when you are younger, you are more restless. You see everything as an achievement. And that's how I started music. I wanted to be part of this group of cool people that they can play music. You know, that's how it started for me. But then you realize if you want to study music, you have to go to a European-oriented conservatory and you have to learn this. And then the older you become, you start to care less and less about the intellectual aspect of music, in fact. And that's not what they promote in academia, in music specifically, because I remember my teachers in Russia, they tend to tell me that you have to compose in a way that no regular person would like your music. That is something that is directly told to you. You have to avoid rhythmic pulses in your music because that's something that is very outdated in European modern music. And these things started to make me think, because if you don't have an audience, how do you have an impact? That is the main question, in fact. If you look at the master works of humanity that have lasted and have aged very properly for the last 500, 600 years, like Johann Sebastian Bach, the reality is that they can connect to any human's heart. And we are proactively told in academia to avoid human hearts. And that is, for me, it's always a big mystery that where academia in the Western country is going and what direction it's taking. So my music also changed according to my character changing. So the first string quartet and the first piece that I wrote, I don't think it's still performed yet because it's so difficult, and every bar, every measure is in a different time signature. It's always it's completely atonal in multi-tonality, and I was very proud of it, and I was praised for it. The piece that was never performed, so it never was heard by anyone. And the closer I got to human pain and what I experienced, the success also started coming towards me, actually. And now I'm very much after connecting hearts through my music. I don't care about the intellectual aspect of it. I don't care about what academia thinks of my music. I care about what average humans think of my music. And that's one aspect of it, just the personal aspect of it. Then also it goes to your heritage and to your identity as a human, where you come from and which melodies are you carrying. Today, melodies are not even appreciated in the Western modern art, you know. That's a real catastrophe, in fact, because European people and people of European origin, they feel disconnected from their own heritage because there are no melodies left. And if you see a 3-hour opera in Met and you come out and you cannot whistle a single melody out of that piece. That's really a catastrophe that people cannot connect to you. I mean, look at melodies from Schubert and Mozart and how they've aged for so long and people still love them. So there was an advice that I got from John Corleone actually through one masterclass, and he told me, he's a composer of red violin, a very prominent composer in New York, and he told me, don't be afraid of being popular. You know, so, and that is a very good advice. Maybe the best advice in composition I received. So music has always been my way of expression. It's still the main language. I know music better than my own language, than my mother tongue. And it's not challenging for me to write music anymore. It comes to me like as if it's a religious vision. It comes to me very quickly, especially if I'm writing something that is relevant to the time. It comes to me, I can write hours and hours of music in a couple of days, actually. And people love it and they think that I spent years on it. But in fact, I wrote I spent like 2 weeks on writing this type of stuff that I'm writing. In fact, we still don't know where music comes from. Okay, that is the reality of it. It's not an intellectual process. It's definitely a process of heart. And the more you listen to your heart and the more you follow your path of heart, the better your music becomes, in fact, actually. So I enjoy my own music now much better than I did 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But if you ask my friends in academia, they might have a different opinion. But I actually achieved more success after I started listening to my heart. And what you learn at school and academia is just the technique of creating music, and that's it. And from after that, life actually begins. Your journey, artistic journey, actually begins from zero when you obtain your doctorate in academia. Actually, when you come out, your journey begins now. Where do you want to go? And I refer you to the story of Rumi, Maulana, or Shams. That Molavi and Rumi was in fact a religious leader in Konya, and he was no poet, in fact. And he meets this wanderer named Shams Tabrizi, who was a Sufi and who was kind of a ridiculous, almost crazy character. And he falls in love with this man, and his entire life changes. There is a famous story that Shams comes to his house and he sees this gigantic library of books in his house. And he asks Rumi if you've read all these books. And he said yes. And Shams starts laughing and throwing all the books actually in the pond that is in the middle of the house. And he says that, then why do you need to keep them for this long? So there should be a jump. There should be an evolution after you learn. And that's when you bring all that knowledge into empathy and into humanity and into regular people. What I experienced before meeting the people at Sirkhane was the intellectual aspect of music. After that, Sirkhane connected me to people, to humanity. So before that, I used to have concerts in San Francisco or New York with 30 people attending, and those 30 people are influential enough to keep my career going. But after that, I am performing concerts that in every event of Flying Carpet Festival, we have between 1,500 to 2,500 people watching. And you have to also define for yourself what audience means, in fact. Performing for the Syrian, Turkish, Kurdish audience, is it different from performing for European or American people or not? This is a question we should be asking ourselves, actually. And what does success mean in reality, actually? I think success means that you can, in music, when you can connect to the most number of people's hearts. And that's what matters eventually. Everything else, all these competitions, grants, awards, prizes, job positions, they are absolutely materialistic success, and they have zero impact on your spiritual development. So my life has become more difficult since I left my academic job in San Francisco and I started working on this festival. But that difficulty brings some sort of satisfaction to my music career because I feel I'm independent. I can talk about the situation in Gaza right now very openly. That 100% of my friends cannot actually talk about it because they might get fired from their positions. And that institutes an independent artist. We all want to be independent artists, but what it means is that you have to be able to say whatever you want, and you have to be always on the side of truth and on the side of oppressed people and on the side of innocence. And if you are avoiding a certain truth, then you are not an independent artist. You are part of the problem, in fact, actually.
Word.
Lots of information. Sorry.
No, this is so wonderful. It is really fascinating first to hear about the purposes of music, the different purposes of music in society, and how it seems like the Western academic trajectory is currently missing the point. I'm wondering, what have you learned now that you are more specifically making music for and with children?
So I don't write specifically music for children. Children are also part of humanity. The experience I have in writing music for children confines to writing for Brooklyn Youth Chorus or San Francisco Girls Chorus, and they're always receiving this very complicated, very intellectual type of music that they don't emotionally connect with. When I write for San Francisco Girls Chorus, and I was the artist in residence in 2023, 2024 for them. I wrote a piece for them, and these are teenage girls. I wrote a piece for them about the women movement in Iran, and that they were shouting half of the piece, basically, woman, life, freedom, And the teenagers today, or the children, they are extremely informed. They're extremely conscious of their surrounding, and they're emotionally far more connected to the pain of humanity than adults are. And that's what you see in all these protests. There are a lot of young people. This is something to celebrate, not something to condemn and to insult. In fact, the fact that we have young people in the US, that they care for people on the side of the earth, it's something to celebrate. We should be proud of it, in fact, actually. And the fact that adults don't react to it, it means that they are just disconnected from reality, as simple as that. So we wrote this piece, and I worked on another project with them, with San Francisco Girls Chorus, and our piece on the language of the birds by Faridin Attar, which was part of a residency of a gallery in San Francisco. And I strongly believe in creating something for children that has the same intellectual capacity and the same intellectual level that it has for anyone, actually. So that's the same thing we do in Flying Carpet. We don't work on children music at all. The way that it's perceived, that it needs to be primitive and basic and always in the happy word. No, our music that we perform at Flying Carpet sometimes becomes very dark, sometimes becomes very dramatic. It can be fully part of an adult concert, actually, because I believe in the creativity of children. I believe that children are actually more creative than adults. They perceive abstract topics and abstract subjects better than the adults, actually, because they don't have a set mentality, a set perspective of reality. They are truly magical creatures that we have on earth. They are not a burden on our shoulders. They are the people that we have to look up to. So that's why I think if children understand your music, they appreciate your music, you are set. Your music is understandable for everyone in the world, actually, because they are the soul and the essence of humanity. They are untouched, they are pure, and their emotions are in the right place, actually. So even when I'm writing now for adults, I'm still writing for young people. I'm still writing for, and that keeps me young also in many ways. And people see me all the time and they tell me that how I don't look like my age. But the reality is because I work with children and I see everyone, even adults, as children. Even the Flying Carpet is a big game that I created for adults to come, and I set very set rules for them. I create very strict rules for them to let them know that we are serious in this game. This is a serious game and you should be involved, and there are rules for it. Every good game has rules in it. And people love to be limited. They love to work in a certain infrastructure that has designed for them. It's part of that love. When something is designed for you, you feel the love inside. And it's true about music composition. The more you feel that the composition cares about the composer cares about the audience, the more connecting and heartfelt it is. The less you care about your audience and you think they should follow you wherever you go, people feel this lack of care in your work. And this is true about a lot of contemporary avant-garde stuff, in fact, that they show themselves as superiors to humanity, as something that people should follow. And that is never true, in fact, because as composers, as musicians, we are part of humanity. We are there to mend the hearts. We are there to ease the pain. And that's our duty as artists. In fact, if we are not doing that, we are not fulfilling our responsibilities and what the world expects of us. We are privileged enough to just play an instrument, to compose music for people. So we have to give back. And that giving back means that we have to care about the audience and their experience. For the people who bring their children to your concert, for the people who come with lots of suffering during the day and all this ugliness of the world and the suffrage of living, and they come to just mend their heart, to fix something in their soul, and you give them something that they should be educated and complicated enough in order to understand. And that's really cruel, in fact. And that cruelty shows itself over and over, and people start to listen to contemporary music as they do. Right now, it's a challenge to program one contemporary piece in any orchestra, and you can ask that from any curator or culture manager in any institutions, starting from Carnegie Hall to smaller venues. People are afraid of contemporary music because they know that deep down composers, as they say in the academia, as something that they clearly say, that we never care about the audience. And that is extremely cruel to me. I don't know there's anything more cruel than that. We have to be in service of our audience, in service of the hearts. And that, and for example, sharing our identity, sharing, for example, I come from Iran, and when I say from Iran, it doesn't mean that I'm just the voice of Iranian people or the voice of Persian people. Iran is a multi-ethnic country with so many ethnicities, from Armenians, Jews, Zoroastrians, African, Arabs, Kurds, Lors, and they all have their own tradition of music. So when we say Arab music also, it's unjust, in fact, because that is a very wide colonial word for a gigantic, colorful spectrum of cultures in our region. Our region is the way it is, the Middle Eastern, North Africa region is the way it is because we have so much diversity inside of us. We are not a singular voice. We come from many. There is no Arab music without Persian music, without Azeri music, without Armenians. Armenians are the oldest ethnicity in the entire region, in fact, actually, and one of the oldest Christian nations in our region. How many of us knows about Jewish music coming from Middle East? We barely know anything about it. That's what I'm curious about. Every part of this region is part of my identity. The Egyptian music belongs to me as much as it belongs to Egyptian people. The Turkish music belongs to me as much as it belongs to Turkish people. It's part of my identity. Interestingly enough, working in the US, people love to hear that. From conservatives to progressives, they love to hear music from Iran. They love to hear music from Tunisia. They love to hear Kurdish music. And we are intentionally depriving them of this spectrum of beautiful culture that exists in our region. And we are following the footsteps of people in the Eurocentric music who are lost, in fact. The European Western culture is in decline. And anyone who denies that, they're not honest with themselves. There is a feeling of decline in the music, in the arts. You can see it when you can sell a banana taped to the wall for $5 million. This is a sign of cultural decline, because I come from a culture that there is 2,000 years of poetry behind it. How can I be satisfied with a banana taped to the wall? How can I accept that as part of my heritage? I cannot, honestly. This is not art. As simple as that. I still enjoy poetry, and I still enjoy the European music also. I love Johann Sebastian Bach. I adore Shostakovich. I adore Stravinsky. And I'm connected to deeply emotional and intellectual and beautiful music from everywhere around the world. And it's part of humanity that belongs to me as much as it belongs to Europeans, as much as it belongs to Arabs or Kurds. So I think that's how music, in fact, connects us all. If we also convey a sense of tribalism and nationalism and racism in our music, we are no different than the people who are starting wars and perpetuating wars all around the world. The music is the most beautiful outcome of humanity, and it's the last remnant of magic in the world. So if we lose this, and if we turn this into some meaningless intellectual process, we end up with some sort of nihilism and nothingness that, as a result of it, you see this massacre of human beings on the side of the world. There is no religion or philosophy or art in the world that would approve of this. Everything we see is a result of nihilism, is a result of detachment from beauty and spirituality in the world. So that's why we cannot connect this type of genocides to a certain religion, a certain ethnicity, because there is no religion, there is no ethnicity in the world that their values would allow for something like this.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sahba. You're sharing so many amazing thoughts and experiences and philosophies. And I really feel like I'm drinking your words like water.
Like wine. And my name translates to wine, actually.
That's it. It all makes sense. It all makes sense. Well, Sahba, thank you so much for joining us today on Radio Habibi. It was an absolute honor to have you here and to listen to the wisdom of the heart that you're sharing so generously. Congratulations on the Flying Carpet Festival, and I hope it continues for many years to come, bringing so many incredible people around the world together and creating magic.
Thank you. What a pleasure to talk to you.
Okay, that was so interesting. I think what struck me the most was like, you see this person who clearly has like very clear beliefs that he communicated really well, and I was able to envision all of like the steps and the like thought processes that were in his brain in order to do like Flying Carpet and all the festivals and all of that. And I think, like, first off, that was really like nice to just like be able to envision this
and to see so clearly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also really admirable that like you see this person with these thoughts and beliefs about the world, and not only did he like clearly like critically engage with them, but he also like made it an actionable step and like made those like thoughts and beliefs drive him towards doing something.
And then perpetuating it and creating the sustainable system around it. And here I also want to say that Sahba is just like such a kind person. Like I reached out on Instagram and Saif like knew him, and so they were friends from something, and then I just like I've been following the work of the Flying Carpet Festival for like around a year right now, and I was just like in awe of the festival this September, and I was just like following on Instagram. I was like, wow, this is the most beautiful thing I've seen ever. And then when I reached out on Instagram, and he was just like so open and kind and made time so quickly, and during the interview just like so generous and giving and joyful, and I left so inspired after our time talking together. So he really is a magical person, and such an honor to have had him on Radio Habibi.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I just think all the people we've interviewed, I'm like, all of these people are so cool. One thing that like really struck me as well is like the way his projects are like not really like, the festival is not a charity like project or some kind of like let's help these like poor people who are like just wanting to survive. Like he's like, survival is not the bar. And I think the way he approached it was like very like admirable, and so much respect came in, like going into these refugee camps with so much respect. It's like, we're gonna like get together and form community and make music.
Yeah. He talks about treating the kids that he's working with as heroes.
Yeah.
And really treat them with what you said, a lot of respect, where so much attention is put into the smallest of details. And it's not just about putting a show, it's about putting the greatest show, with the most beautiful stage design and the most wonderful puppeteers and incredible music with world-class musicians. It's really like the creme de la creme of the experience of art. And that is powerful. That's poetic. I really love the inclusion of international artists, and not the inclusion, like they're needed.
Yeah.
And that kind of also reminds you of the role of the artist right now. Like artists are people who carry magic and beauty
and I think like also the actual purpose, like he talks a little bit about that, of like, what is the purpose of art if it's not like forming like communities and getting people to feel something and making them understand it and accessible for everyone. And we really forget that music is like an integral part of revolution. Like I'm thinking of Sabrine that we interviewed on our first episode, and how they were like, their songs were the chants and like the protests, all of them had their songs, and how like it's still remembered as Sabri, a big part of Palestinian resistance and resilience. And I think like that's almost forgotten in Western music.
Yeah,
how powerful music is as like an agent of like change, you know?
Exactly. Like right now I am thinking, for example, of Macklemore.
Yeah.
Who's the only kind of person who has gone like, okay, we're gonna write a song about Palestine right now, and we're gonna make it a rap song. And anyway, so it really seems like that aspect is forgotten, and it's not forgotten. It's because people are sinking into comfort.
Yeah,
and that's another thing that we talked about in this interview. Is just like really what happens when Sahba puts it in the context of suffering and avoiding suffering and the importance to grapple with that suffering. But we are really just like more and more comfortable, and in this material comfort that we can acquire, we just like get distracted from all the emotional and spiritual turmoil of this moment in time.
Yeah. And it's like we're chasing comfort so much in these like material things that we actually like forget that like the value in suffering and the value in like being able to critically look at the world and be like, this is kind of like collapsing right now, and like it's we're not really doing anything about it, and it's like I'm thinking of the climate, I'm thinking of like Palestine, the genocide happening, I'm thinking of all the like geopolitics in the area, and it's like we're really not in a great place right now as a planet, as humanity.
Yeah, we really aren't.
And instead of like trying to do something about it, we're sinking deeper into like, how do I avoid being affected by this right now?
That's true. I feel like there is a rise in somewhat rising consciousness now, or like right now in the
definitely.
We're also seeing people who are like, if I'm not affected right now, I might be in a shorter time, or people who are so purpose driven. I really think that at first I was really struck by the idea that that the world is already imbalanced and that suffering is just part of the deal, because it's so not the way we're brought up, or we think of justice, of rights and wrongs and this duality. But here Sahba comes and goes like, Sufi believe that everything is already in order and that suffering is just part of it, and you need to accept it, and not really in this passive acceptance, but accept it and do something about it and follow your trajectory in it, because you have a set trajectory. You talked about the Sahba's perspective on children and how inspiring that was.
I think like it was just like really interesting, the fact that like we view as young people as like these naive creatures who have not like, and we view the fact that they haven't been conditioned to like adhere to these like colonial standards of living as something that's like bad, or like that's like, oh, like you haven't been socialized enough, you don't know. But I think it's really interesting the way he views young people as like, first off, like creatures who are like the most able to understand the pain of humanity, and who are like very conscious and aware of their surroundings, and also in touch with their own emotions, and the fact that they have the same like intellectual capability of like any other human creatures, and doesn't really disrespect them either, and also like really values their own like minds and brains, and makes really good music that doesn't really dump it down for anyone.
Yeah, not only does he think that they are capable to comprehend this music, but that he's saying that they have more of an ability to get abstracted or abstraction, and like to have a more powerful imagination and connect more deeply to what they're presented. So he's like low-key saying like children are to be deeply respected, and he just like keeps emulating that energy, that childlike energy of just like so much wisdom, and also so much generosity and excitement and joy. I also really like about how he's talking about the Flying Carpet Festival as a big game.
Yes, that was so awesome. Like,
a big game with with a lot of rules, because that's how the best games are.
Yeah.
And it really feels like it. It's like just bringing a lot of people together with very challenging logistics, and you have hardships, and then you have a goal, and the goal is this incredible festival, this storytelling events, and these workshops, and all of these kids. Like, it really sounds like You know, if the Hunger Games was like good, like the opposite of the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
But the
Honestly, yeah.
So yeah, I think that was a pretty awesome interview.
It really was. Like, and I'm so glad that like each time we interview someone, we're always like in awe at the end.
Yeah, it's such a joy and privilege, and so many lessons, like so much to reflect on. Thank you so much for listening to the 4th episode of Radio Habibi.
Thank you guys, and I'm like, it's such a joy to like see random people coming up to me and be like, I watched you, like I listened to your episode. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, a big shout out to my cello professor at Bowdoin who listened to every single episode of the podcast and shared so much excitement and a shared curiosity about the powers of music
Yeah.
In the world. So it's so wonderful. See, podcasts build community.
Yes, in their own ways.
In their own ways they do. Okay, thank you so much for listening. Find us for the final episode of Radio Habibi in January.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.